Welcome to the Confidential Financial Disclosure Quick Start Guide. If you're watching this video, you have probably been assigned the review of a confidential financial disclosure report, otherwise known as an OGE Form 450, for the first time. In this short video, we'll briefly explain the purpose of confidential financial disclosure reports, who files confidential financial disclosure reports, what they report, and when they need to file. We'll briefly describe the resources that can help with a review, the process for reviewing OGE Forms 450, and what to do if you uncover report entries that may require action by your filers or your agency. Finally, we'll share with you some courses that can help you move from a novice OGE Form 450 reviewer to a confident and competent reviewer of these reports. What is the purpose of the confidential financial disclosure system? In short, the sole purpose of the system is to prevent conflicts of interest and other ethics concerns. Let me say that one more time. The sole purpose of the system is to prevent conflicts of interest and other ethics concerns. A conflict of interest occurs when a federal employee takes government action on a government matter that could affect the employee's own financial interests, or the financial interests of certain family members, or those with whom the employee is financially associated, like an employer or business partner. Put another way, it is when there is a nexus between the financial interests of an employee and the work of that employee. So the purpose of the system is to help ensure employees do not work on matters that pose potential conflicts of interest. So who files these reports? In short, employees who have duties that pose potential conflicts of interest. Below, you'll find a link to a job aid that you and your agency can use to help decide if an employee holds a position that ought to require filing of a report. What do employees report on the OGE Form 450? They report their financial holdings, like stocks, bonds, and certain mutual funds, the holdings of retirement accounts, sources of outside income, outside employment and other positions, some debts, and certain gifts. They also report the financial and business holdings and arrangements of close family members. I encourage you to read carefully the instructions on the OGE Form 450 to become familiar with what needs to be reported. When do employees file OGE Forms 450? An employee must file an OGE Form 450 within 30 days of entering a position designated by the employing agency as requiring an OGE Form 450. Employees who hold filing positions must also file annually thereafter on February 15th. So now that we know a little bit about the confidential financial disclosure system and its purpose, let's look at your role, the role of the ethics official who reviews and certifies OGE Forms 450. Earlier, we discussed the purpose of confidential financial disclosure, to prevent conflicts of interest. And you'll remember, a potential conflict of interest occurs when there is a nexus between the duties of a federal employee and their financial holdings or relationships. So to review a report for conflicts of interest, we need two pieces of information. One, the financial holdings and relationships of the employee as reported on the OGE Form 450. And two, the duties and responsibilities of the employee filing the report. If you are not familiar with the duties and responsibilities of the employee filing the report, you must have that information before you can properly review and certify the report. Some sources of that information may include a formal position description, documents outlining planned work for the employee's business unit, and conversations with the employee or the employee's supervisor. Some agencies also enlist supervisors as intermediate reviewers to help identify potential conflicts of interest among their staff members. Once you know what your filer's duties and responsibilities are and have a completed OGE Form 450, we are almost ready to begin the review. We'll also need some reference materials to help us review the OGE Form 450. The first reference is the Confidential Financial Disclosure Guide. You can find the guide by navigating to Resources for Ethics Officials, then Financial Disclosure, and then scrolling down to the Confidential Financial Disclosure section. The guide will be the first link. We'll also need to know where to find the Analyzing Potential Conflicts of Interest collection. To find it, we navigate to Resources for Ethics Officials, then to Conflicts Analysis and Resolution, and then scroll down to Analyzing Potential Conflicts of Interest. Now that we know which information and resources we need, we can put it all together and take a look at an OGE Form 450. For this exercise, our filer, Gov employee, is an IT specialist. Gov's job is to make sure our office has the business machines and IT resources it needs to function properly. Gov frequently is asked to select and purchase computers and software for use in our office. We also have the OGE Form 450 filed by Gov. We'll look at an excerpt of the form in the next few minutes. As we do, 2 questions need to guide our review. 1. Is there a nexus between the filer's duties and the entries on the form? And 2, do we have enough information to say definitively that an entry will pose a potential conflict of interest, or that it will definitely not pose a conflict of interest? If we are not able to answer either question for a particular entry, we need more information before we can certify the report. Let's look at our first entry, Vanguard IRA. If we look in the guide, we find that there is an entry for IRA plans. That entry tells us that these plans are tax-advantaged accounts that hold other assets, and that we need the filer to identify those assets on the report unless those assets are diversified mutual funds exempt from reporting. We can then consult our second resource, the Analyzing Potential Conflicts of Interest collection. When we do, we learn that our nexus test should apply to the underlying holdings of the plan, such as the stocks, bonds, and non-diversified mutual funds the filer may hold. Using the 2 resources together, we learn which information we need from the filer, and most importantly, why we need it. We could send our questions in an email or make a phone call to the filer. The answers we receive back might look like this. Here, we've updated the form to reflect our filer's responses. Now we continue with our process. 2 pieces of information, 2 questions, and 2 resources to help us. We see that the IRA holds a single stock, Intel Corporation. We can use our guide and the Analyzing Potential Conflicts collection to help analyze the stock. The guide tells us we need the name of the company in which the stock is held if it is worth more than $1,000 during the reporting period. The collection tells us that an employee who holds stock in a company is prohibited from participating, personally and substantially, in any particular matter that the employee knows would have a direct and predictable effect on the issuing company. In other words, we need to be careful of a nexus. So the guide and the collection have helped us answer our 2 questions. Is there a nexus between our filer's duties as an IT procurement official and the stock reported on the OGE Form 450? Yes. Do we have enough information to determine definitively that the holding reported on the form will pose a conflict of interest, or will definitely not pose a conflict of interest? Yes, we have a potential conflict. So what do we do? The collection has our first course of action. We must tell our filer to avoid participating in any government work that would affect the financial interests of Intel. Then we can decide if a regulatory exemption might apply. In this case, there is an exemption for publicly traded securities valued at less than $15,000. If our filer has more than $15,000 worth of Intel, and we need the filer to work on matters affecting Intel, we can direct the filer to sell all or some of the stock in order to break the nexus. This is the basic process for analyzing entries on OGE Forms 450. 2 pieces of information, the holdings and the duties, 2 resources, the guide and the collection, And 2 questions. Is there a nexus, and can we be certain there is, or definitely is not, a potential for conflict? This has been a very brief introduction to Confidential Financial Disclosure Review. To build your knowledge and skills further, we encourage you to take some of the courses listed on this page. Thoroughly familiarize yourself with the resources linked on this page, and if possible, seek feedback and support from colleagues and leaders in your agency's ethics office.